Hi, everyone. I'm Michaela Hallmark, and I'm a therapist here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I've been working on ways to figure out how we can give reviews for our business, honestly, and thought, so in our industry, we can't ethically ask clients to give us reviews. And so then it's just kind of like, all right, how do we get our name out there? How do we get our information out there? And so I decided to put together some of the talks that I give for a lot of the high achievers that I work with. And even outside of my therapy practice, I do some psychoeducation. We'll do talks and presentations for people and figured, well, I'll record this and offer it to people and say, hey, do you mind leaving us a review for the business? When you do that, if you're not a client, please don't indicate you're a client, but you can absolutely share and say, I learned a lot from Michaela about shame, took one of her presentations, found it to be really helpful, or anything like that. Of course, you don't have to give a review, so feel free to take this information without giving a review if you want. So today we're going to be talking about shame. And I work with a lot of high achievers in my practice, so I'm going to kind of use that as a lens. But if you don't identify as a high achiever, it's still good information for you. Shame is something that can oftentimes be hidden, particularly for high achievers, because we do, and then we feel good about that. And then we don't really visit the shame that's underneath the surface that might be driving some of the behaviors. So as you're thinking about shame, what I want you to be thinking about is, what if I didn't? So what if I didn't make VAs? I always joke that high achievers don't know how to study for Bs, right? So what if I don't make VA? What would that mean about me? What if I didn't people please? What would that mean about me? We want to start seeing if we can kind of start digging deep in to think, what does this mean about me if I don't do that thing? And we can get more into that, but we want to see, is there any shame language around it? And shame is different than guilt. Guilt can sound like kind of the definition of it is, I did something that doesn't line up with my morals or values. Shame is different than guilt. Shame is different than embarrassment. Embarrassment is kind of fleeting. We can laugh about the thing that happened in the past. And it's different than humiliation. Is something happened to me that was not okay. Shame is this inherent deep belief or sense that something is inherently wrong with me. Not enough. I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, I'm a failure, I'm inadequate. Those are some of the messages we might hear with shame. Okay. Now, oftentimes we will hide them and we will think, well, I just should do this thing or I should be this way, but we don't necessarily dig down to the why. What would it mean about me if I was not? Okay. So now we're going to start taking some notes. This is going to take probably about 45 minutes. You can listen to this if you want while driving in the car. You can sit down and take notes. I don't have a lot of like super fancy PowerPoints. So, a lot of people like need to do things while they're listening, and that's okay. I encourage you, though, if you can, to take notes because this is really good information. A lot of this information, on shame, I got from Brene Brown's teachings. She actually put together a kind of CEU for therapists that I attended where I got a lot of this information, but then she's put some of it in her books, and she's done a lot of really incredible work on shame and grit and vulnerability. So feel free to read her stuff and watch her stuff if you'd like. So if we put shame in a petri dish, and if you're taking notes, you can draw a circle on a piece of paper. We're going to draw two circles. There's two petri dishes. This is a science experiment here. If we put shame in a petri dish and we feed it with secrecy, isolation, and judgment, shame grows. Secrecy, isolation, and judgment, shame grows. What I teach people about judgment is, kind of having a strong opinion, maybe labeling, maybe very black and white in our thinking. We can judge ourselves and we can judge others. Side note about judgment, when we're working on shifting from judgment, what I tell people is shifting from a place of judgment doesn't mean we get rid of wisdom. So, for example, if I'm sitting at a red light and a car flies by me through the red light, and I say, ah, effing jerk. I'm being careful with my language here. What an effing jerk. He could have killed somebody. That's a judgment. And the reason why is because I called him a jerk. But what do I do instead? Do I just look and go, toxic positivity, everything's fine and dandy? No. So, what I try to do when I'm working towards shifting from judgment is I try to go towards labeling the feeling and the fact from wisdom. So, feeling and the fact might sound like, oh, that was so scary, someone could have died. And what that does is it still honors what could have happened in the moment, but still leaves room for the what if. What if he's having a medical emergency and he literally cannot press the brakes, right? Leaves room for that. Maybe he's not a jerk. Maybe he really is a jerk and he's not caring about anybody as he's flying through that red light. So wisdom still honors the feeling and the fact, but we don't go into judgment, okay? Because when we point fingers at someone else, when we're judging, we have three fingers pointing back at us, and that fuels our own shame. So we want to be careful with not judging ourselves, but also not judging others. Okay. So that's that petri dish. Take the other petri dish and we put empathy in it. And shame in it, and we feed it with empathy. It cannot grow. Empathy is talking about feelings and why they make sense. It's a feeling with, it's a connecting with and understanding emotions. Empathy doesn't mean that what someone did is okay or that behaviors are not problematic. Again, it doesn't replace wisdom. It's a gentle approach, though. It's how we might speak to someone we're gentle and kind to, so maybe children or the elderly. So now in your notes, going to the next section, we're going to write down a formula. If you need an example of what those circles just looked like in your notes, here it is. You can kind of take a screenshot if you'd like in my handwriting. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is write a formula, and the formula is for shame resilience. So we're going to start with courage plus compassion plus connection. Courage, the way that I describe it, is being willing to act opposite of what shame tells you to do and having the courage to be vulnerable. We'll talk a little bit more about vulnerability later. Courage plus compassion. Compassion is exposing yourself to compassion, either getting compassion from others, giving compassion to others, or being around compassionate experiences and people. And then the last piece, courage plus compassion plus connection. Connection is connecting with safe people in safe places, genuine connection. So not having that people pleasing, not having a mask up, actually letting that down and genuinely being vulnerable with safe people and safe places. This doesn't mean that we go out and tell everybody all of our stuff. That's not how vulnerability works in this context. When we teach vulnerability is with safe people in safe places. So we benefit more from relationships where we can get deep and real. This is not about connecting with a whole bunch of people and surface level connections. It's more about deep, genuine connections. And those three things together, courage plus compassion plus connection, build equals shame resilience. Brene Brown teaches that shame is a naturally occurring emotion. So this is not something that we necessarily get rid of. It's more something that we build resilience for and we build understanding towards. All right, your next thing, you're going to draw 3 shields, and I'm going to show you how I drew them. Nobody's judging your shields, okay? This is how I drew mine. Captain America's shields are circles, so you don't have to worry about it, but I want you to draw 3 shields. Brene Brown teaches from her research that there are 3 traditional ways that we tend to respond to shame to try to shield us. And the way that I describe it to people is when we put up this shame shield, it's actually ineffective because shame gets behind the shield with us and we're pushing people away. The first shame shield, and you can label it if you're taking notes, is moving away. And moving away is secret keeping, isolating, disappearing in your own life. The way I describe it is you can be in a crowd, but not really be present or not really be true to you as you're in that crowd. The next type of shame shield is moving toward, and that's simply people pleasing. The way this works is I feel shame, I put up the shield. So I'm in a group of people. I mean, this is classic me. I'm in a group of people. I feel like I'm not enough. I don't belong. And what do? I put up the shield of people pleasing. Let me see how I can make people happy with me so they think that I belong, so that then I don't feel shame. The last one is moving against. And moving against is causing hurt, pain, shame, anger in someone else in order to avoid your own shame. This can sound like below the belt digs. It can sound like name calling. It can sound like sarcasm. It can sound like more intense abusive language. But I feel shame in me. So what am I going to do? I'll like do a little jab at the other person verbally. Three main ways we try to shield ourselves from shame, but they don't work. The shame still happens. Now, what do we do with all this information? I'm going to pull up my notes here because it's a little easier for me to remember. So, reminder before we move on, there's the shame shields. And now we'll go into how do we deal with this? What do we do with all of the shame that's happening? What I'm going to have you do is we're just going to draw the shame item on the left and then put a little line and connect it to the shame combator on the right. So it's going to look a little bit like this, and we'll go down with each item. So we already talked a little bit about shame and some of the messages of shame, just as a reminder, I'm not enough, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm a failure, I'm inadequate. And the way that we combat that shame is with empathy. The next item underneath shame is using shame shields. And Brene Brown teaches in her research that the way that we combat that is by building awareness and understanding, knowing our triggers for shame, and recognizing the feeling of shame. So that when it comes up, we're able to automatically say, like, oh, that's shame. That's one of my triggers. Next item in the shame cycle is there's actually going to be three for this one. Each is going to have a descriptor, and then we'll go to the ways to combat it. So the first item is reinforcing the language of that. The descriptor is there's something wrong with me. The next item is individualizing. It's only me. And the next item is pathologizing. I'm broken. And go ahead and draw your line. The ways to combat these, and I use combating loosely because remember, we don't completely just get rid of shame, but we work on building awareness, kind of understanding and working how to be more resilient and kind of shift the process of it. They have a title. So the title of this is Practicing Critical Awareness. And the antidote to reinforcing is demystifying. So this is understanding how shame works. So much so that shame has a color, a picture, an essence. We get so familiar with shame that as soon as it pops up, we say, oh, that's shame. I know exactly what this is. And instead of holding on to the contents of this low-hanging fruit that shame wants you to like latch onto and focus on and be stressed about, instead of holding on to that, we shift our focus and attention to shame. And we don't spiral into the shame messaging, that rumination that we're tempted to do, right? When shame gives us that language. So demystifying, understanding how shame works. The next item is contextualizing. And the message of that is this is bigger than just me. And then the next item is normalizing. And the message of that is we all struggle. An example, small example of this that happened to me. I started this new job back in the day. I worked at a university in a counseling center, and I was working with all these super impressive counselors and thought, I don't know how I ended up getting hired here. These people are amazing. And one of my first days in the office, I walked into my boss's office and I was asking her a question. And I walked out and I looked down. I had this kind of light colored coat, business appropriate coat on. And I looked down and there's this stream of what looked like chocolate. Maybe I had drank some hot chocolate or something just stained on my coat. And I instantly was like, oh, I was so embarrassed. But beyond embarrassment, shame hit me. I could feel it in my stomach, kind of heat rising in my chest, and thinking, oh, they're gonna know I don't belong here. I'm an imposter. And so then I had to recognize, oh, this is what shame feels like. This is how it pops up in my body. And then I had to start demystifying, right? So, oh, I understand how shame works. This is exactly how it's going to hit me. This is how it's going to feel in my body. This is bigger than just me. This is big. Me being a counselor is bigger than just what I look like and what my jacket looks like. I'm here to counsel people. I'm here to support people. And so is everybody else. And then the next one, normalizing, we all struggle. I had to kind of think for a second, I had to think about, okay, none of us are perfect here. Let me think about my colleagues. Let me think about how we show up. Hey, people sometimes have stains on their clothes. Sometimes it happens. We all struggle. We all have our things. So that's just a small way that I've implemented this. Okay, next item on the left in the shame cycle is separating and insulating. And that's when we tend to withdraw, isolate, protect ourselves in certain ways. And some of that, if you start to think about how you tend to insulate, for some people, they do withdraw. For some people, they drink alcohol. For some people, they use substances. Maybe they smoke. Maybe they really focus on outward appearance. There's all kinds of ways that we insulate. The antidote to that, the way to combat it, is to reach out, share our story, and create change. And sharing our story again is where we work to reach out to safe people and safe places. We're not sharing our story with everybody. Not everybody is ready for it. Not everybody is healthy and can respond to that in good ways. And then creating changes, going back to that, acting opposite of what shame tells me to do. So if I go in a crowd and my tendency tends to be to move away, so to secret keep, to isolate, to kind of disappear in my own life. So I go into a crowd, maybe it's like a networking event or something. And that's what I tend to do, kind of say to myself, I might purposefully say, okay, what's the opposite of shame here? The opposite of shame for me, if it feels safe enough, is to go up to a group and say, I feel so uncomfortable. I don't know anybody here. So I just told myself I was going to come and introduce myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Michaela. You know, that might be my acting opposite of what shame tells me to do. But let's say I'm a people pleaser, right? So shame hits, and what do? I put up that shame shield of people pleasing. So typically I like turn it on and I show the charm. If I'm trying to act opposite, it might be that I actually make myself comfortable with just being the quiet person. And that might be my way of showing up, acting opposite of shame. And I might throw something in here or there where it feels appropriate, but I'm not forcing myself to turn on that charm as a way to respond to the shame. And if my natural response, so my shame shield tends to be to turn against, to move against, I might use kind words instead, or I might honestly share my feeling really embarrassed here, and I might need to regulate myself or something like that instead of acting out on somebody else. If I really wanted to be opposite, I could give them compliments too, but not sarcastic. Okay, the next item in the shame cycle is shutting down or acting out. And the antidote to that is expressing ourselves. So sharing our feelings and asking for what we need. So if I find myself acting out or shutting down, I might need to pause and think, how am I feeling right now? I'm feeling sad. And I might share that with someone if there's a safe enough person and a safe enough place to say, hey, I'm feeling really sad. And I felt myself shutting down. So I just wanted to share that. Do you think we could connect a little bit? Do you think we could chat? Or can we go get some movement in so I can get some energy in my body? That might be what I need, but just asking for what I need instead of shutting down. And sometimes it's not even asking another person, but it's asking myself, right? Oh, I'm feeling sad. What do I need? I need connection. There's a person I could go chat with. Let me go chat with them. So slowing down enough to even think, asking myself for what I need instead of just responding immediately to shame and shutting down. It's interesting in the research, Brene found that there's typically two ways that men tend to respond to shame, and it's shutting down or getting angry. So that's just a side note for you. That's pretty much it. There's a lot of ways that shame can tend to pop up in our lives, and this is something for you to just kind of chew on and think about, is there any way that this pops up? Another thing I like to do a lot of couples work, is I also like to think of the fact that sometimes when a person is moving against me using that shame shield, they might be experiencing shame. And if it's healthy enough, we might even be able to explore, oh, I might have just bumped up against a wound. This is what I hear Danielle and Russ West talk a lot about. They're with intentional marriages. They'll talk about how they're a couple who's been married, I think, over 20 years, and they have done couples therapy all throughout those years. And they learned that they would bump up against each other's wounds. So what's interesting to me about that when we look at it from a shame perspective is sometimes we get triggered, our spouse says something, and oof, a wound gets hit. And how do I tend to respond to that wound being hit? I might shut down, moving away. I might people please, moving toward. I might uh, make a mean comment or say a dig myself, moving against. What if I notice that as a trigger and I do my own work about, oh, where did I learn that narrative? Where does that shame come from? Where did that get rooted in? And is my spouse intentionally trying to press on this, or is this my own wounding? A lot of times we bump into each other's wounding. We don't even mean to. So if I can see, oh, let's say my husband says something mean to me, and I can see, why is his reaction so big? And I can notice, oh, I wonder if I just bumped up against a wound. And I can respond to that instead of responding to his turning against, I might be more effective, right? Because if he says something to me, mean to me, and I say, what are you talking about? That just, we're in a fight then. But let's say he says something to mean to me, and I say, honey, did something just bump up against the wound for you there? If we've had that talk. Or if I say, honey, that just went really sideways. What just came up for you? What am I missing here? That might be more effective than to turn against. Now, I'm not saying don't set boundaries. If you have any questions about this, talk to your couples therapist. Okay, this is just education. So this isn't me saying this is what you should do. This is just me giving examples of how this might show up in relationships. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is info@atlantatherapistbuckhead.com. Therapist is singular, so no S on the end, and it's BUCKHEAD.com. Info@atlantatherapistbuckhead.com. I'd love to be able to answer questions for you. I'm going to have someone share our Google business page so that if you want to leave a review, I would be so grateful. We're just trying to figure out how to spread the word for our clients in our local area. And I'm available for consultation if you're a therapist and you'd love to talk more about shame. Please feel free to reach out. Thanks so much, everyone.